Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Finance and Operations Apps Tech Talk. Today's topic is Dual Write Framework. My name is Adrian, and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of Microsoft Corporation. By participating in the session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being a part of the recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the TechTalks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during today's presentation, and we will have a little time at the end for further questions. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Severin Bach, R&D Solution Architect, Mo Alawa, Senior R&D Solution Architect, and Nalima Gudavala as Senior Program Manager. Severin, you now have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome to the Tech Talk about the dual write framework. And we are more than happy to get this Tech Talk available for you. It's a long journey we are in. Those of you who following us on Yammer and stay tuned on new areas know that this dual write framework was in preview for a very long time. So end of March 2020, we announced it to be generally available for all of you. So therefore, we are more than happy to speak about this subject. We're expecting getting a lot of questions, and go and shoot questions all the time. We are respecting every question. If you're not able to answer within this Tech Talk, we are taking care about an FAQ later on, so that your questions will definitely be available for us. Okay, so let's have a look what this Tech Talk is about. We like to achieve the following objectives. We like to ensure the basic understanding of the dual write framework, that you do feel comfortable of what this is all about. You do have a little bit tips and tricks, that you are aware about the service overview and architecture, that you're aware about what's coming next. So we talk a little bit about upcoming features. Mo will take over to do a demo on the dual write, and is then going to share some implementation considerations. So for us, it's very important that when you're going to use dual write, that you do know, okay, what is important before you're, following a bad pattern, so that you're, taking a step back and thinking twice about what this integration is all about. Okay, so what we're not going to cover, that's a full list of application integrated scenarios. So we're not going to demo every master data synchronization we have in place, or we're not going to demo and talk about the detailed end-to-end business processes in scope. Like process to cash. We are touching areas, but we're not running on those in this Tech Talk. Again, we are trying to get an overview done and get a understanding of the architecture. We're not going to do a deep dive into application lifecycle management. We're not going to speak in details about the Dynamics 365 human resources, and we're not going to speak in detail about the Dynamics 365 finance operations. Okay, so we are focusing here really on the Dynamics 365 finance and supply chain management. All right, so that's the detailed agenda. Why dual write, overview architecture, how to get started. After that, we're going to play a demo, or not play, to execute a demo, and then we are speaking about implementation considerations. Go and ask questions all the time. Okay, why dual write? So with dual write, we are solving a challenge. At the moment, our customers monitor sales processes in sales, while fulfillment and invoicing is happening in finance operations. At the moment, without dual write, the applications do not share the same data. That means, you need to think about how to integrate, how to move data from left to right. There are solutions available like classic data integrator, or you could go with a custom solution as well by using Azure backend. But at the moment, without dual write, there is not a real, easy possibility to get this application linked together. And that's the area where we really like to, announce dual write. Dual write is helping applications to let the data fly between the applications. So when you're working on sales, you're creating an offer or creating a customer, that the record customer, the order is going to fly from sales into finance and vice versa. So that the both applications we do have, or the applications we do have in customer engagement side of things, and finance and operations are using the same amount of data. So it's not an own SQL database, which is somewhere existing. It's two different separate databases, and the data is flying between, and it's happening directly during the transactions. I will talk a little bit more in the next slides. So just to give you a feeling why we do have do right. Yeah? The main strategy of us in Microsoft of Do-Right is that we are providing a streamless exchange of data beyond the application boundaries, so that we are providing a one dynamic 365 experience. That at the end, it doesn't matter where you're creating the quote, where you're creating the order, or where you're creating and modifying the customer record. It's living in both applications. Depends on the setup of Do-Right for sure. We have design principles in place. That means we are trying to have a harmonized common concept of how we are thinking about a customer, how we're thinking about an order, right? So that we do have natural flows covered. Another design principles is that the user experience should be very easy. So there should be no extended user training required. There should be no extended development experience required. It should be out of the box available for administrator to be configured, and out of the box available for the end user, so that the end user at the end will not see that there's data flying around it just happening in the back end by our framework. And the benefits we're getting is definitely one dynamics user experience, that it's adding finance and operations into the picture of the sales and marketing and field service side of things, and that which enables us to have the digital feedback loop more completed, right? The feedback loop on customers, products, people, and operations that helps you to drive new innovations that we can go empower new markets in the future. Okay, so licensing model, the Do-Right by itself is a service we are adding to our product, but you do not need to have an additional license for it. So it's included in your finance and operations subscription. So that allows you to get the data written into the CDS. But as soon you need to have the data, you need like to use the data on sales, you have to have the subscription for sales, for marketing, for whatever custom engagement apps you like to use. So that's not included. So take care in this area. Overview and architecture. So as I said, it's a create and the update delete operations. So the cut operations in finance operations results into writes into CDS and vice versa. So that means it's very tightly coupled. We are talking about an integration which is inside the same transaction. So soon you're saving a record and sales, the transaction is open as long the saving is happening and the insert is happening in finance operations. And only when both applications got the commitment or got the it's validated and everything is saved, then the transactions will be closed. So it's very tightly coupled. It's a near real-time fashion. So that means we're talking about seconds here and not about minutes or hours. Within a second, Mo will show in a bit, you will see it's happening quite easily that data is flying between the applications. It's bidirectional, so it goes from sales to finance and operations or from finance operations into sales, vice versa. So it's your choice. You can select on the entity level which kind of direction you like to have. Left to right, right to left, or both. We are supporting master data and business documents. So master data, for example, if a customer record you're creating and modifying, and business documents we're talking about a sales order or quote, an invoice. Master data could be as well reference data. For example, customer groups, tax informations, main accounts. So those kinds of informations are available as well to be replicated into sales. I will talk in a bit why this is required. Think about Do-Right not only as an infrastructure by itself, not something which, like an integration framework, you're just using and configuring, and then you're going to get data from left to right. That's not all. We do have the application side of things as well. So that really Do-Right has two aspects, infrastructure and the application aspect. So the infrastructure is providing you a near real-time experience with a live sync of data. So within seconds, you can play, pause, and catch up on errors. So you can easily, work on the status on the entities. You have an availability to sync initial data. So think about when you're creating a customer in sales with Dual right now, you're getting a little bit more more mandatory fields like a customer group, because finance operations is requiring to have a customer group filter entered, or some text information, a currency, and those kinds of mandatory fields needs to be available in sales, that the insert process or the modify process is flying through the application nicely. So to have those kinds of field there, it is very useful to have a lookup on the customer groups, and therefore you do have a lot of reference data which needs to fly through the applications, and that's done by the initial data sync or by the initial write functionalities. We do have a ton more capabilities. With the next slides, I will go on some of them in more detail. But yeah, just to have a look on the applications, on the infrastructure side of things, we do see here. I like to mention ALM capabilities as well, that you can create a solution package in CDS to move your customizations through the environments. On the application side of things, we're really trying to have an out-of-the-box experience, that you not need to develop something that's just an easy configuration at the end, that you're selecting the entities which you need to enable for dual write, and then the application functions are providing you the richness of easy configuration. We are enhancing the CDS to work on to be ERP ready, so that we really have a single source management for users. We are adding a little bit more currency functionalities from F&O to CDS. We are bringing a company concept and a party concept to CDS. So when we're talking about the global address book, for example, finance data, tax data is going to live being available in CDS as well. On pricing, we're working on an inventory. There's a lot of things happening to CDS to be more ERP ready. And having then streamless process orchestration, like I said, the multi-master of companies and vendors, we do have a little bit procure-to-pay processes. At the moment, we are supporting the process-to-cash scenarios. So just keep an eye on what is possible at the moment, and that's the journey we're in. Right? It's not there from day one, and everything is covered. We do have a solid bulletproof solution at the moment, but we will go and enrich functionality regular in every release wave. So take care and stay tuned on the area. On the infrastructure side of things, let's have a look to some features. I already mentioned some of them, but yeah, it's a near real-time bidirectional integration. It's embedded inside finance and operations, so the configuration which you will see is happening inside F&O. It's a very easy setup. It's simple for the end users to drive through. You can apply filters and you can transform the data before it hits an application. You can use an out-of-the-box entities, but you can add your custom entities as well. So when you are an ISV partner and you have your own solution available, you can add those as well. So DualWrite is able to be extended. If you're a customer, you need to have more fields, or you have an own master data you need to synchronize between, go and add those. It's very easy to create it. You have to have a data entity in finance operations, and you have to have an entity in CDS, and then you can configure both entities to be available in DualWrite. All right. So there are some more capabilities, like we have error handling available. We do have a possibility to react on errors, on unplanned maintenance. The ALM already mentioned, to move your customization through the different development stages and test environments. You are able to create packages and push them into the marketplace, to the app source, that you really can go and use DualWrite for your customizations as well. Some upcoming features on the infrastructure is about having the capability to add a company, a legal entity, after the environments are linked. So that's something where you see a limitation at the moment. That's what we're doing at the moment in the backend. We will share more performance guidance in the future, that you do know a little bit more what are our thresholds we are in on DualWrite, how many records you can execute, and those kind of things will be shared. We do have more capabilities in the area of ALM. So when you're thinking about the database movement operations between connected environments, there's at the moment something where where we need more capabilities. That's coming, that's addressed. So that's fine at the moment. We're getting a one-click and to unlink environments. At the moment, you need to stop every mappings and then you can unlink. That's going to be much easier. And we are going to support it for GCC, so the government cloud computing. As soon as you do have the sales on the government cloud, that's then something where DoRite can help you to get this into finance operations hosted in a not government cloud. Some function scenarios, integrated customer master. We can go and integrate and integrated vendor masters as well. The organization hierarchy in F&O can be moved into finance operations. We do have possibilities to use your on-demand price engine, customer loyalty cards, reward points. The whole process to cash flow is available. So from a prospect to a customer, to a quote, getting a product into it, having a price, moving a quote to sales order, getting the invoice for an order. So the whole process to cash flow is available on DoRite in a real real-time fashion. We have a unified product mastering experience. That was a challenge, to be honest. The product data model in CE and finance operations is, different. And with this DoRite, we aligned the model that we can let the products fly between applications nicely. We're getting access to finance data and tax data in CE, so that is able to be replicated as well. On field service, we do have possibilities that you really can use DoRite as well. We're introducing a company concept. That's very, very important to know. That with the business unit concept in CE and the legal entity concept in finance operations, we got two concepts in the past. And with DoRite, we are aligning this concept, and we're calling it having a company concept available. That there's a solution how to link the business units with legal entities that you can handle those in a very nice fashion. So have a look to the documentation. There's a good documentation out there which helps you to understand the very details of it. And at the end, I like to mention the integrated worker, job, and position scenarios, which is available for the human resources side of things. As I said, project operations is not covered, but we are going to work on the project to cash experience as well. So that's the last item here in this list. The other functional features which are upcoming is having a lookup on-hand inventory availability existing and the available to promise dates for products. So that is something we're working on. You're getting integrated nodes. That was the most common asked question. What about the global address book and finance operations? So with DoRite, the next big wave we're getting is including the global address book capabilities, so that you can have a party and address integration scenarios play nicely with DoRite. And yeah, procure to pay and project to cash experiences will be added. Let's go down to the area of the map. So with a demo, you will see what a map is. At the end, it's an entity which you need to enable, and the entity is combining an entity in CE and an entity in F&O. And with this mapping, you're going to link them together. And you can pick and select a specific entity, and you do see there's a status. So when you're starting with DoRite, every entity, every mapping is not running. Okay, so there is nothing happening, and you need to go and run it. As soon as you're clicking on run, it goes to the first state of initializing the entity. So it's an initial write. It's a copy of pre-existing data which is happening. So we need to prepare the CE environment or the F&O environment to get data which is already existing at the moment in the environment. As soon as that's done, the map is able to be enabled, and that goes automatically, and then it goes to running. So it's executing, it's reacting on the events, on the plugins which are happening. You can stop and pause it. So as soon as it's paused, there is no change happening anymore. The changes, the requests you're doing on sales and transformations are getting queued in the backend. So for example, you can then go and do maintenance on finance operations. You can deploy packages, you can restart services, you can do your operations you need to do sometimes. As soon as it's ready, you can go and resume the maps, and then we are catching on queued records at the moment in time where you pause the mapping. So in the right-hand corner, you do see a little bit the flow, but maybe that helps you to understand the statuses. We do have descriptions and what kind of actions are available. So why to have initial writes? So thinking about the customer. So as said in the some seconds or some minutes before, the customer is containing a lot of more mandatory fields in F&O like it is in CE. So we need to enrich the model for a customer in CE that the data can fly nicely without defaulting any value. For example, that is what we did in DI, in Data Integrator. But with dual write, we try to have a solution which is much better. That's getting the data directly entered into CE. That data is flying nicely, and therefore we have initial data available, like customer groups, like the payment information, the currencies, the tax information. So a lot of data needs to be initially written form files operations into sales before you can create to start a customer in sales. So just have a look to this concept. Go to docs, check it out if you like to learn more details. The architecture is kind of easy. So thinking about the scenario, CDS to finance operations, we do have entities in place, we do have mappings in place, we do have an event which is happening. As soon as an event is happening, the plugin is getting called, which is available in CDS. The CDS is the plugin is using the mapping which is configured, and then it goes down on OData to the entity by itself and going to execute and validating and saving. This is all happening in the same transaction. Okay, so an error message, what you get on F&O is getting to be published on the CDS application, so that you cannot save a record as soon, for example, a zip code validation is activated in finance operations. So just an example, or credit limit is enabled, and those kinds of things. And this is the same architecture is happening on the F&O side of things. When you're going to write from F&O to CDS, you do have an entity, you do have mappings, you do have events, happening on the create, update, and delete actions, using the mappings, going on OData, going on CDS, and then getting it into the same transaction again and trying to save it as soon as it's there. Then the commit is happening on the database. Okay, so that's the easy concept. How to get started? It's an in-frame happening in finance and operations. So the setup requires a finance and operations. It's available inside the data management workspace. Okay, so you see on the picture here where it lives. It's kind of easy to find. You can click on it, and as soon no environment is linked, you get this screen. That means you need to link to an existing CDS environment. That's available inside F&O at the moment. We are working on that. We do have a connection available on LCS, so that the linking of environments is happening inside LCS. When you're creating a new environment, or when you do have already an environment existing, you like to link it. So that's something where we're moving for. It's in preview, so it will be GA very soon. All right. So as soon the relevant CE environment is selected, you need to select which kind of legal entities you need to activate. You can select multi-legal entities. On the connecting the environments, we have a health check in place. That means you need to have a specific pre-setup existing. Adding users, we'll talk about in a little bit more. But with this health check, you can see, okay, you did every setup which is required. Does the service have all the access rights? Are you on the correct app version, like 10.09, and those kind of things? And as soon as it's ready, you can go and activate the environment link. And then the entities are available. So you will see in a bit in a demo how it looks like in detail. But just to give you an idea, there's a list of entities, there's a status on each map, and then you can go and enable it. And then you see, okay, here you see the customer groups, that's a running dual write mapping, and you see the changes are flying around. So that's an introduction. And now I will move it to Mo to execute the demo. Mo, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Severin. Hi, everyone. Severin, can you just let me know once you can see my screen?
I can see your screen.
All right. Thanks, AJ. Right. So in terms of the demo, I think we want to cover a couple of things in today's demo. So number one, I want to show you this the steps required for the dual write setup. And then we want to highlight some of the functional scenarios, how the company concept looks like on the CDS side, how the integrator customer master experience looks like, and how the data moves seamlessly back and forth, whether it's record creation, update, or delete. And then we want to talk a little bit about the error handling. Once we are done with the demo, we want also to focus on the some of the implementation considerations. So let me go ahead and switch to my browser. Just give me a second here. Right. So before I start, it's worth noting that, as Severin mentioned, we are working on simplifying this process. So what I'm going to show you now is more of the manual setup to link your finance and operation environment to a CDS instance. We are simplifying this process to make it as a one-click setup experience directly from LCS. So think about it: when you are provisioning an environment from LCS, you should be able to link it to an existing or a new CDS environment. But since that feature is in preview and it's evolving for GA, so let's just focus and talk about the manual setup. Now, before I show you actually how to set things up, I just want to call out a few prerequisites that people sometimes overlook. The first thing is we need to set up some application users on the finance and operations side, and similarly on the CDS side. The reason for that is because the dual write technology is a tightly coupled synchronous integration engine, and what that means is that the data or the integration have a direct connection between the two systems. So, for example, finance and operation, when it needs to send data, it sends the data to the CDS through a direct connection, and vice versa. So what you need to do is you need to create some application users on each application side to allow those incoming connections. So let me quickly show you how does that look like. If I go to my finance and operation environment and I go to the Azure Active Directory applications form, you will be able to see that I have actually set up two application users in this case. One application user for incoming connections from the data integrator side, and the other one for incoming connections from my CDS instance. Now, the reason you can see data integrator side on this incoming connection is because when we use initial write, what we do actually is there is a good overlap between the dual write and the data integrator infrastructure in the backend or behind the scenes. So an initial write is nothing but hidden data integrator project, right? So in an initial sync mode or in initial write mode, what happens is we have incoming connections from the data integrator to your finance and operation. And once you are in a live sync mode, the connections will be incoming from your CDS instance. So basically, you need two application users for two different type of connections, and you need a similar setup on your CDS environment. Those users with their IDs are properly documented on the documentation. So I just wanted to quickly show you that. The other key piece of the prerequisites is that you need to have certain dual write solutions installed on your CDS environment. So because dual write has two aspects, the infrastructure and the application aspect, we have two separate solutions for those. So let me show you how does that experience look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my Power Platform Admin Center. And if I go to my Dynamics 365 environment, I should be able to go there and click on Manage Dynamics 365 Apps. And what that shows me is all the solution packages installed on this environment, and allows me to install other packages from the app source. Now, because I have already installed some solutions before this demo, you should be able to see the two dual write solutions that I have. So dual write core solution is focused on the infrastructure capabilities and the solution awareness for dual write maps, while the other one, the dual write application orchestration solution, includes all of the out of the box entities and mappings that we ship as part of dual write. Now, prerequisites aside, let me go ahead and start setting up the link between these two environments. So if you remember from the slides, that entry point for dual write is directly embedded within finance and operation, right? So all I have to do is to go to my data management workspace, and there you go, you can find the dual write icon. Now, because this environment hasn't been linked to any CDS environment before, you will see that the experience in dual write will already indicate that and will allow me to link my environment to a new environment, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead, link this to a new environment. And the next step is that the system will be able to find all CDS instances that I have access to within the same tenant so that I can pick and choose which one I want. Since I already have a single instance here, I'm just going to go with that, click next. And then you can have one or more legal entities selected. So we do have a native support for multiple legal entities. And as you can see, this list is actually coming directly from your finance and operation database. So I'm going to go ahead and pick 2 legal entities. And in the final step, you'll be able to see the health checks. We check a couple of things. We check the application version on the finance and operation side to check that you are on platform update 33 or above. We check that you have already installed the required solutions, and we also check those required application users to make sure that any incoming requests are working successfully. So I'm going to go ahead, click next, and create. And what that's going to do is basically it's going to establish or create a link between my finance and operation and my CDS environment. Now, the next step, if you have been doing this on your environment, is basically you will come up with an empty page, something similar to this. The reason I already have maps in my environment because I have already used this environment in previous demos. But for you, when you start the setup, this screen will be empty, and the next step would be to import those maps. Importing those maps is very easy. You need to go to the apply solution side, and what that shows you, what that will show you is all Power Apps or CDS solution packages that have dual right entity maps in them. In this case, we have a solution that is part of the out-of-the-box experience. So you can go ahead, click, choose that, click apply, and that will import the maps. I've already imported those maps, so I will skip that step. Now, once we are in this page, let me talk a little bit to you about the navigation. As you can see on the top navigation, we have environment level actions, right? So things like refreshing the environment, looking at the environment details. And then if you pick any of these entity maps, the navigation will switch to be a map level action. So you can do things like starting or stopping a map, deleting the map, and changing the versions. Many of those actions will be covered later today in the demo, so I'm not going to go through each one of them. The other thing I want to highlight in terms of the navigation, if you look at the top right hand, you will be able to see that you can switch between different views. So you can look at the integration at the entity maps of a certain status, right? Whether you want to see all running, post integrations, and so on and so forth. Another useful feature is that you can easily locate your integrations in question by just using the search. So in my case, I'm interested in all integrations for the customer entity, and as you can see, that gives me this easy search experience. Now, once you have located a specific entity map, you can click on that to go to the next level. This might take a minute or two, but basically what I want to show you here is that we have 2 sections. Once you are inside the map, you have 2 parts in that. One part that allows you to filter data to determine the triggering or what allows the data to be triggered for synchronization, and another section more focused on the field level mapping. Now, while this screen loads, let me talk to you quickly about the naming convention, right? You might have, if you have used Data Integrator, you might have remembered that in the past you had to create projects and tasks, and you had to give them names. In the dual right world, names are auto-generated, and all entity maps are auto-named based on a combination of the finance and operation app entity name and the CDS entity name, so that it's very easy for people to locate those entity maps, whether you're coming from the ERP or the CRM world. So now this entity map has loaded. So let's talk a little bit about the filters, right? Now remember that dual right is a bidirectional integration, right? Which means that filters can be applied at each side of the integration. Maybe the easiest way to explain why filters are filters are needed is to explain a real life scenario. So Let's talk about this specific scenario. Now, this integration is designed for B2B customers or business-to-business customers, which means that I don't want all customers from finance and operation to go through this integration. I want customers only of a certain party type, customers of an organization party type to flow through this, customers of other types like people or persons or individuals. I have a different map for that. And also on the CE side, I want only accounts of a certain type, right? On the CE side, you can store accounts of different types. So you can have in the same account entity, not only customers you put there, you can also store vendors, competitors, and other things. So the filter I want to add on the CDS side is that I want only accounts of a relationship type equal customer. So to add those filters is basically done by just clicking on this funnel icon. And as you can see this way, I have already indicated that on the finance and operations side, I only want to integrate records of a certain party type, organization in this case, and for the CDS side, I only want to integrate records of a certain relationship type, customer in this case, which equals to 3. And then if you have used the data integrator interface before, this might sound already familiar to you. You have the field level mapping, so you can map fields from finance and operation entity to fields on the CDS entity side. But the key difference to data integrator is the map type. So now if you click on this, you should be able to see that we have introduced the sync direction now, right? And what that allows you to do is that allows you to decide on a field level whether the data should be synced in a bidirectional fashion or from finance and operation to CDS or the other way around. And finally, we have some basic transformation capabilities similar to what we shipped before. So we have a default transformation, truncate, and value map. Value map is usually used useful in scenarios like you want to map values for the gender field, for example, say where finance and operations store gender values as male and female, while CDS stores it as 0 and 1. So you can use that to add this mapping. Now, once you are ready with your entities, now, we have imported our entities, we have reviewed, and we know which entities we want to activate. The next step would be actually to switch this entity to an active state, right, to actually run it. And you can do that either directly from this screen, or I can go back to the home page and pick one or more entities and click run. In this case, I'm just gonna stay where I am, and I'm just gonna go for run. And what you can see is the next thing you will get is the initial rights and related entity maps form. And that allows you to do two things. Number one, it allows you to enable or disable the initial right or initial sync. So if you have data on either side of the application, you can use initial sync to bring this data, merge it, and consolidate it so that you have a unified data set on both applications. And that, whether you want to enable or disable initial sync can be done through this tick box. The other thing you can do is you can also discover all the related reference and setup data or related entity maps so that you can run them in the right sequencing, and you can also decide whether you want to run the initial sync or not. So in my case, I'm going to leave everything as default. I do want to start the customer integration. I do want to go with the initial sync. I do want also to run all the related integration scenarios, such as the customer group, the terms of payments and currencies, since a customer map will have dependencies on those. So I'm going to go ahead and click on run. Now, if I go back to the home page, I should be able to see that my entities, all the related entities are switching from not running to running state. Now, this is going to take some time, right? So let's switch to another environment I have previously linked and prepared for this demo to show you what happens post this stage. Right, so I have just switched to another environment where I've already done the same steps, and as you can see, my entity maps are already in running state. Now I can scroll back and forth to see which entities are in that state. I can also use this column to filter data or to sort data back and forth, or I can easily just switch to the running view so that it can show me all related entity maps in that specific status. Now, once an entity map is in running state, it's ready to be used, right? So the first thing, so I think with that in mind, let's switch gears and talk a little bit more about the functional scenarios. So the first functional scenario I want to talk to you about is basically the company integration, right? Company concept or a legal entity concept is a well-known concept from finance and operation. One way to look at the list of companies you have in an environment is to look at the top at the top right hand. You can see this company selector that shows you all the companies. Another way for you to edit or create more companies is to go to the legal entities form. So let me go there. And you will be able to see a list of all legal entities I have in this environment. Now, company concept in finance and operation is used for two reasons, right? Number one, to from a data management perspective, to specify which records belong to which company, and then with that there is a security implication, right? So you can say that certain users can only see certain companies while other users see other companies, and we brought both concepts to the CDS side. So let's start with the first one, right? In the what we have done on the CDS is that we have introduced a new entity to hold the same level of data. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch to my CDS environment, and if I go to the advanced find, you should be able to find, once you install DualWrite and establish the linking, you should be able to find a new entity for companies. If I go there and click on results, you will be able to see the same list of companies synchronized to this environment. Now, this entity helps us with the company striping concept, so that when I have something like an account, a contact, or an order, I can determine which company does that account belong to. But that only helps to from a data management perspective, right? It doesn't give us that security context. So for getting that security context, we also create a one-to-one mapping between these company records and the business units. So let me go ahead and show you how does that look like. If I go back to my CDS environment, if I go to advanced settings, security, and business units, you should be able to see the same list of legal entities created as business units. Now, if you click on any of these business units and look at the teams, other than the default team, you will find that we have created our own special team. Now, this team is used when records are synced from a certain company in finance and operation and landed in CDS. The ownership of that record will be done through the special team, so that that record lands in the right business unit. Let me show you that in action, actually, right? So let's switch over to the integrated customer master scenario, and then we will be able to discover how does that company concept look like. So I'm going to switch back to finance and operation, and I will go to the customer screen. What I want to do is I want to create a new customer from finance and operation and show you how does that flow seamlessly to my CDS instance. So let me go ahead and create a new customer. As you might have noticed, I am currently running in the USMF company context. So let me just give it a number. You could have number sequencing here, no problem. Okay, just filling some of the mandatory fields and then save that record. Now, what you will notice that immediately once this record is saved successfully, I can go back to my CDS instance, search for that, and I will be able to see that same record, right? And not only that, if you open the record actually, you will see that the company striping is correct. So I can see that this record actually belongs to USMF, but also from an ownership perspective, if you look at the team, it is owned by that team, which basically means that this record belongs to that USMF business unit. So users who only have access to data in that business unit will only see the appropriate records accordingly. Now, not only record creation is supported, I think we already mentioned that record updates are supported as well. So in this case, let me go ahead and do some correction to this data. I'm just going to change the name and change the customer group, and I'm going to go ahead and save it. So I'm doing the changes from the CDS side at the minute. And as soon as the record is saved, if I go back to finance and operation, click refresh, you will see that we have the same changes syncing through immediately. Now, I think another scenario I want to discuss when it comes to customers and generally for other entities as well is actually, you know, when we say integrated customer master, we're thinking about multi-mastering scenarios, right? So a customer or a vendor could start its life cycle either from the finance and operation app, or it could also start the life cycle from the CDS side. So in this case, let me go ahead and create a new customer from my CDS environment. The first thing you will notice is that you have the same kind of experience, right? You still have the ability to choose which company this account belongs to. Let me just go ahead and fill some of the mandatory fields. And then I can also provide numbering. And if you remember when I was talking about the filters, I only want to integrate accounts of a certain type. So I'll pick the relationship type to customer, and I will pick the customer group. Now, before I go ahead and save this record, in this case, I want to add some address information as well. So the reason I'm putting certain information here is because I have already activated the address validation in finance and operation based on the city and the zip code. And what you will see is that the error message you can see now is coming directly from finance and operation based on that validation logic. And what it's saying is that this postal code is not valid or not found for this country. So what I can do is I can either fix my reference data directly in finance and operation, or in this case, if I know that this is an invalid zip code, I can just simply go ahead and fix my data on CDS, try to save it again. And then, as usual, once the record is stored, if I go back to finance and operation and search for demo, I should be able to see these two records, right? And finally, just to conclude, not only record creation and updates, you can also, we also support record deletion. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this record that I've just created. And what you notice is this, the record that has been deleted from the finance and operations side has also been deleted from the CDS side, right? So demo 11 is gone. Now, let me cover the last part of the demo where I want to talk a little bit about the error handling. Now, with the zip code validation demo, you have seen how errors are being reported directly to end users while we are in what we call a live sync mode, right? The integration is already running and it's triggering some validation rules. However, sometimes as an admin, you want to be notified for any unexpected error messages so that you can take some manual or automatic actions. So think, for example, you know, if finance and operation goes down for some planned or unplanned outages, or say, for example, there are tons of validation errors. We have some features that helps you to control that and to control what happens there. So I'm going to go back to my dual write and talk to you a little bit about the alert settings. So if you go back to dual write from the home page, top navigation, you have the alert settings. With each dual write linking, we have a default alert setting, and you can add your own alert settings as well. But let me go ahead and look at that. And what the alert settings allow you to do is to have some kind of a trigger-based notifications and automatic actions. So you can say for a certain error type, if it happens in number of times in a certain time period, you want to take certain actions, right? And errors have different types. Things like application error, which is similar to the zip code error you saw, or things like 503, where the system is totally down. So you can differentiate between these errors, and then you can take certain actions such as being alerted by emails, or you can put your dual write integrations to stop or pause status. Now with that, this concludes our demo. So let me switch back to the implementation considerations. And right, just one thing before I forget, once you set up this alert settings, the email notification that you get if any errors happened will be something like this. We will report to you that a certain entity map has been erroring. We will report how many errors we had, what's the interval, and what kind of automatic action we took according to the rules that you set up. So now let me go ahead and switch back to the slides. And let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the implementation considerations. Right, as a FastTrack, we work with customers to learn from them the success factors in their implementations and make sure that we capture some of the best practices and not too good practices. So things that we recommend and things that you wanna avoid. So we have a couple of areas that we want to discuss today. So I'm gonna start with the instance strategy. Now, when we think about the instance strategy today with Dual Write, we only support a one-to-one link between finance and operation apps and CDS instance. And for that, there are certain things that are certain design considerations that you want to put in mind. Number one, we only support the instances for FNO and the CDS to be hosted in the same tenant. So if you have a CDS instance in a separate tenant, that doesn't work and is not supported. The other thing is for the best possible performance. Remember, we said that there is a direct connection from your finance and operation to your CDS instance and vice versa. So for the best possible performance, you want to reduce the latency between these two environments. So our recommendation is to host them in the same Azure region. So if you go for North America for finance and operation, you want to do the same for your CDS instance. And I think one last thing to consider is that the out-of-the-box scenarios that we ship with Dual Write, all these applications scenarios, the integrated customer master and so on and so forth, these can only be used with a Dynamics 365 apps enabled CDS instance. So when you create a CDS instance today, you have the option of either creating it as a blank CDS instance with a database, but without the Dynamics 365 apps, or you can include them at the time of installation. We have dependencies on those apps, so we only support installing the Dual Write application orchestration package on a CDS instance of that type. Now, things that you want to avoid, avoid hosting your finance and operation and CDS instances in two different regions with higher latencies, as that will definitely reduce the overall performance. I think the opposite to the do's, you cannot link finance and operation apps and CDS across two different tenants. So even if you want to, that is not possible and it's not supported. You cannot link a finance and operation instance to multiple CDS instances or the other way around. So one of the common patterns is where people have where they have split their CDS workload or split the CDS instances by workload. So say, for example, I have one CDS instance for my customer service workload, another one for my sales workload, and I want to map these two to a single finance and operation environment. That is something that we don't support with Dual Write. So our recommendation is to combine your CDS workloads into a single instance and link that with finance and operation. And finally, I think I've already mentioned this, that you cannot use the out-of-the-box scenarios with a blank CDS instance that doesn't have the Dynamics 365 apps. If you try to install it, the installation will fail. Let me move on to talk a little bit about the initial writes. So for the initial writes is best used to create initial data of low volumes. And what we mean by that, think of initial write as a good the right technology to create the initial reference and setup data, and even master data if it's in low volumes. We are working on a guidance on around volumes to give you some kind of an indicators. But when we talk about low volumes, we're thinking about thousands or maybe even tens of thousands. But if your data volume is much higher, so if you have the hundreds of thousands or the millions, you are better migrating the data into each app separately before even enabling Dual Write. So you can at that point migrate the data to each application, and at the time of enabling Dual Write, you can just simply skip the initial write step. And because of this, when this becomes a typical data migration exercise, there is the typical wisdom that goes with it. So to plan for your data migration outside cutover window to avoid being in a time crunch. Now that all means that we encourage you to plan for testing any Dual Write related data migration and entity sequencing ahead of the cutover before you go live to make sure that you have that properly covered in your cutover scenarios as well. We cover different scenarios, or we support different scenarios. You can be coming with a fresh finance and operation and CDS instance without any data, or you could be coming with a CDS instance with existing business data. Now, if you are on the latter, before you can actually use dual write with that CDS instance, you need to bootstrap this data with some company information before running the initial writes. We have already provided some sample .NET code that allows you to do that company bootstrapping, and we have some documentation around that in this link. One of the key things that you want to avoid, basically, avoid using initial write as a data migration replacement, right? When we get to the data migration mode, and you have, either very high volume data or very high transformation complexities, a typical data migration exercise requires special performance and error handling considerations, right? And this is suitable to be done outside and before enabling dual write. Now, when it comes to the application scenarios, we have shipped lots of out-of-the-box integration scenarios. I think at the time of GA, we shipped 66 plus out-of-the-box entity maps, and we have just got started. We are even investing more there. So I think the advice there is, if you have a high degree of fit between what we have shipped out of the box and the customer requirements, then you can use all these entity maps as the final solution. If there are gaps, then at least plan for reusing what we shipped as building blocks for the final solution, right? So our recommendation is to evaluate the available out-of-the-box scenarios. Do not think about dual write as a pure infrastructure capability or an integration tool. There has been tons of investments and harmonization across the applications on the data model and on the concept side. So you want to evaluate those out-of-the-box scenarios, understand what they are, their limitation, and leverage them in your final solution. And that also means that we encourage you to leverage harmonized concepts such as the company concept and its related security alignments. Even if you have a simplified footprint on your finance and operation environment. So we talk to customers who have a single legal entity, and for them they see they see the company concept more of a burden to be introduced on their CDS instance. But our recommendation is keep all of that in place. It will future-proof your solution. And if you have a simplified scenario where you only have a single company, you can use things like business rules to default these companies and then hide those fields, right? But rely on these out-of-the-box solutions instead of building your own integrations. And that takes me to the things that you want to avoid, right? Avoid starting from scratch with 100% custom maps. This typically happens when you look at dual write purely from a infrastructure and a technical lens without looking at what we ship out of the box. One of the things you want to consider is that you cannot run the two different versions of the prospect to cash scenario. So we previously shipped one version with data integrator, and today we have another version on the dual write. Those two versions cannot be run side by side. So for that, we have a migration path already in preview for you to move you from the data integrator to the dual write version. Moving along to the application roadmap, our general recommendation is to stay aligned with dual write journey and future scenarios, right? Align with our roadmap, join the insider program, join the dual write Yammer group to get the previews, the latest updates, and also to share your feedback. One of the key things we hear is that people are waiting for some of the key upcoming items and then planning to build their own custom solutions, right? So today we are already aware of certain upcoming features, things like the global address book concepts in CDS, or ability to synchronize multiple addresses for a customer. Other things like the default dimension concepts in CDS or the project operations integration. If you need to build a solution today, our recommendation is to minimize customization around those known roadmap items, so that once we have that these features available out of the box, you can simply transition to the standard feature. And the same goes for what we encourage you to avoid. Avoid building complex customizations, almost reinventing the wheel if you know that something is already upcoming. In terms of the data management, you want to make sure that you ensure scenarios compatibility, so that there are certain things are supported today and certain things that are not. I think the first thing to consider is when you want to run high volume bulk operation on dual written data. So say for example, I'm dual writing my products and I want to update, and I have 1 million product in my product master and I want to update the sales price once a month. If you want to get the best possible performance of that operation, consider pausing those related dual write maps during this bulk operation and then resume it on completion for a asynchronous catch up. The other guidance around number sequences, the number sequences in both applications are not connected today, right? We don't have the concept of a global or shared number sequence. So in a multi-mastered entity scenario, plan for either separating the number sequence format or the number sequence ranges per app. And I'm showing a few examples for that, for how that looks like. And on things that you want to avoid, it's worth noting that today you cannot use the finance and operation cross-company data sharing feature with dual write, as that's not yet supported. Now, when it comes to the error management, our general recommendation to proactively configure alerts, setup and notifications, consider pausing dual write during planned outages and maintenance windows, especially if you know that users will be using the system, to avoid them getting some unexpected error messages. Otherwise, if you didn't pause it and nobody is using the system, you'll be fine. And you proactively configure the alert notifications and settings so that if there has been any unplanned maintenance, any unplanned outages, and there are tons of error messages, you can gracefully manage that and handle these errors. And finally, for the application lifecycle management, we made dual write solution aware, and we want you to leverage that. And what that means is that any dual write related customizations, whether you create entity maps or customize existing entity maps, these can be added to Power Apps solutions to help you with your ALM story. So we encourage you to use that and to use Azure DevOps to store those solutions as well, instead of moving things manually. We have a few resources for you that will be shared for the slide. And with that, I want to hand it over to AJ for closing.
Thank you. Do any of the presenters have any closing thoughts?
No, I think we're good in the questions. So we got a couple of from you. So thanks for raising questions. As soon we didn't got every questions answered, we'll take about those questions and working on an FAQ, so that we are going to publish those questions on a docs article later on. So yeah, thanks for asking questions, and hopefully that tech talk was for you good to get started with dual write.
All right, thank you. I just posted a short survey in the Q&A panel. Please let us know your feedback on today's session and let us know what you'd like to see in future events. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the TechTalks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. This concludes today's web conference. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and audience today. Have a great day or evening wherever you are.